Welcome, dear friend, and thank you for choosing to spend this quiet interlude with us here in our little haven of stories. It is always a joy to know that these gentle murmurings might find their way to a listening ear, much like a soft breeze finding an open window on a warm evening. Our dearest wish for this particular story, The Quietude of Rooted Stars, is that it might serve as a soft pathway to peaceful rest, a gentle unwinding of the day's tightly coiled thoughts. We hope its quiet cadences and soft-lit scenes will be a comforting presence, coaxing your mind towards that tranquil state where dreams may softly bloom. And so, before you settle in and allow your device to rest beside you, if these tales bring you a measure of peace, perhaps you might consider leaving a little sign of your visit with a like. And if you wish for more such quiet journeys, a subscription to our channel would be a most welcome kindness. Chapter 1. The Threshold of Hush. It was not by any map nor by any clear decision that the traveler found the hidden way, but rather by a gentle, insistent pull, like the scent of rain on dry earth calling to a parched throat. One moment there was the familiar, indistinct landscape of a long and featureless journey, the air holding a certain tired grayness, and the next a subtle parting in the dense old hedgerows, an opening no wider than a deer might make, from which emanated a quietude so profound it felt like a soft, invisible curtain. The traveler, whose own name had long since softened into the mists of forgotten paths, felt a gentle nudge, not of urgency, but of quiet invitation. And so, with a weariness that was more of the spirit than the bones, they stepped through. The world beyond the hedgerow was instantly, wonderfully different. The air itself seemed to possess a texture, a soft, silken quality that caressed the skin with an unexpected coolness, like the first breath of evening in a sheltered garden after a warm day. It carried upon its gentle currents a most curious and delightful perfume, a base note of rich, dark loam, the very essence of fertile earth, overlaid with the delicate, almost ethereal sweetness of blossoms that surely belonged to the night, or perhaps to dreams themselves. The light here was subdued, a pearlescent gloaming that seemed to emanate from no single source, but rather to be held within the very atmosphere, softening all edges and lending a gentle mystery to the ferns that unfurled in silent welcome. A profound hush lay over this hidden place, a quiet so deep it was not an absence of sound, but a presence in itself. It was the quiet of ancient things, of slow growth and undisturbed slumber, the faint rustle of leaves overhead as the traveler passed beneath the boughs of trees, whose bark was as smooth and pale as polished bone, was less a sound and more a silken whisper, each leaf seeming to shimmer with a faint internal luminescence, as if tiny pearls were embedded within their veins. Far in the distance, almost at the edge of hearing, there was a hum, a vibration so low and gentle it was felt more in the bones than heard with the ears, the sound of the world itself breathing deeply and contentedly in a hidden, peaceful sleep. The traveler moved slowly, each step cushioned by a carpet of fallen leaves that had long since lost their crispness, becoming a soft, yielding layer underfoot, their colors muted to soft browns and faded ochres. There was no path to follow, yet the way seemed to unfold naturally, leading towards a small alcove formed by great smooth stones. These stones, ancient and weathered, possessed a surprising warmth, radiating a gentle heat as if they had been basking in a sun that was not visible in this tenderly lit vale. Their surfaces were incredibly smooth, like river pebbles worn by centuries of flowing water, yet dry and inviting to the touch. Within this natural shelter, the traveler sank down with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of countless unspoken miles. The sound, small as it was, seemed to be instantly absorbed by the encompassing stillness, muffled by the soft air and the silent, watchful presence of the glowing flora. For the first time in a duration that felt like a small eternity, a sense of having arrived, truly arrived, settled upon them. The weariness remained, yes, but it was now a gentle thing, a precursor to rest rather than a burden to be endlessly carried. The subtle, sweet scent of the unseen blossoms deepened, a comforting balm to the senses. The light, or what passed for light in this sheltered domain, began to coalesce in the gloaming. It was not the fading of a sun, for no sun seemed to preside here, but rather a slow gathering of softness, as if the air itself were condensing into gentle visibility. The leaves of the overarching trees, with their pearlescent sheen, cast down a diffuse, gentle radiance, making the small alcove feel protected and serene. The hum, that distant, sleepy breath of the earth, seemed to grow a fraction more perceptible, a soothing thrum that vibrated through the warm stone at the traveler's back. A small, iridescent beetle, no larger than a dewdrop, landed upon a broad, velvety leaf nearby. Its carapace shimmered with all the soft colors of a twilight sky, gentle lavenders, dusky pinks, and the palest of blues, before it unfurled equally delicate wings and drifted away into the deeper shadows of the ferns, its flight as silent as a falling petal. The traveler watched its departure, a faint, peaceful smile touching their lips, the first in a very long time. There was nothing here that demanded attention, nothing that hurried or jarred. Closing their eyes, the traveler drew in a slow, deep breath of the sweet, loamy air. It felt clean and life-giving, carrying with it the promise of profound repose. The warmth of the stone against their back was like a gentle hand, steady and reassuring. The quiet was not empty. It was full of the subtle life of the vale, the rustle of the pearlescent leaves, the gentle thrum from the earth, the soft, sweet breath of the unknown flowers. It was a quiet that invited surrender, a soft blanket for a tired soul. And so, nestled in the heart of this unexpected sanctuary, the traveler began, at last, to rest. Chapter 2. First Glimmers of the Under Sky. As the soft, perpetual twilight of the vale deepened, or perhaps merely settled into its customary state of gentle suspension, the traveler's senses, no longer dulled by the monotone of their prior journey, began to awaken to the more subtle wonders of this sheltered place. It was a slow unfurling, like a tightly closed bud responding to the first tender warmth of an unseen sun. The initial impression of profound quiet began to resolve itself into a tapestry of minuscule, gentle sounds. The almost imperceptible drip of dew from a broad leaf onto the soft earth, the faintest sigh of air stirring the delicate fronds of ferns, the nearly silent unfurling of a new leaf on a nearby glowing stem. It was the light itself, however, that held the deepest enchantment. The traveler, resting against the warm, smooth stone of the alcove, noticed that the luminescence of the surrounding flora was not static, but pulsed with a slow, rhythmic grace, like a gentle, steady heartbeat. This soft wave of light seemed to originate from beneath the rich, dark soil itself, a gentle welling up of radiance that nourished the roots and suffused the petals and leaves with their otherworldly glow. It was as if a hidden firmament, an under sky of soft constellations, lay sleeping just beneath the surface of the vale. Drawn by a gentle curiosity, yet feeling no inclination to disturb the profound peace of the place, the traveler rose and stepped softly onto the mossy ground. The moss itself, they now saw, glowed with a faint silvery blue light, particularly in the deeper, more shaded areas, creating pathways of softest sheen that seemed to invite gentle exploration. Large, cup-shaped flowers, their petals the texture of thickest cream, were slowly unfurling in the tranquil air, revealing interiors dusted with what looked like powdered starlight, a fine, shimmering gold that cast a warm, inviting glow onto the delicate, curling tips of nearby ferns. The scent released by these opening blooms was different again. A hint of spice mingled with the sweetness, like warm gingerbread just taken from a kind oven. It was then that a figure emerged from between two particularly large, glowing fungi, their caps like softly illuminated parasols. He moved with a quiet that was part of the vale itself, his footsteps making no more sound on the mossy earth than a falling leaf. This was Elmsworth, his face kind and lined with the gentle map of many peaceful seasons, his eyes holding the same soft, observant light as the flora around him. He wore simple clothes of a soft heather brown, the fabric looking as if it were woven from fine root fibers and softened with countless dew-fall mornings. In his hands he carried 2 steaming cups, fashioned from a smooth, dark wood that seemed to absorb the light. Elmsworth offered 1 cup to the traveler with a gentle inclination of his head and a soft smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The traveler accepted it, the warmth seeping pleasantly into their chilled fingers. The steam rising from the cup carried a comforting aroma of sweet grasses, a touch of dried apple, and just a hint of something akin to warm honey, a fragrance that seemed to promise immediate solace. "A welcoming brew," Elmsworth murmured, his voice low and soft like the rustling of dry reeds. "The vale offers its own comforts to those who rest here." They sat together on a fallen log, its surface covered in a plush layer of the silvery blue moss, which felt surprisingly warm and dry to the touch. No further words were exchanged for a long, comfortable while, a silence that was companionable and deeply restful. The traveler sipped the infusion. It was warm, sweet, and deeply soothing, each sip like a gentle balm spreading through their chest. They watched as the subterranean light pulsed softly, a slow wave of gold washing over a patch of ferns, causing their intricate patterns to stand out in brief, luminous relief before the light softened again to a gentle thrum. Elmsworth, with a quiet gesture, pointed towards a cluster of small, bell-shaped flowers, their heads nodding gently in an almost imperceptible breeze. As the underlight touched them, their translucent petals seemed to capture it, glowing from within like tiny lanterns of a soft amethyst hue. "They sing sometimes," Elmsworth said, his voice barely disturbing the quiet. "A very small song, for very small ears, but a happy one." The traveler listened intently and thought they could almost perceive a faint, high-pitched chiming, like miniature glass bells stirred by a fairy's breath. The feeling of being truly seen, not by eyes that judged or questioned, but by a place that simply accepted, was a novel and profoundly comforting sensation for the traveler. The gentle presence of Elmsworth, his quiet tending of this luminous garden, added to this sense of peaceful sanctuary. The subtle thrum from the earth, the soft glow of the plants, the warm, honeyed scent of the infusion, all wove together into a sensory lullaby. The weariness was still there, but it was now a soft, yielding thing, a gentle invitation to sink deeper into the embrace of this extraordinary starlit earth. Chapter 3. The Language of Light and Loam. The days, if such a measure of time had any true meaning in the perpetual gentle twilight of the vale, flowed one into the next as smoothly and quietly as water over moss-covered stones. The traveler found their awareness sinking ever deeper into the subtle rhythms of this unique place, a quiet immersion that asked nothing but presence. The most profound communications here were not in words, but in the shifting play of light from the rooted stars below, and the responsive sighs of fragrance from the lumen flora above. It was a language of pure sensation, understood not by the mind, but by the heart and the awakened senses. The traveler learned to discern the subtle variations in the subterranean luminescence. Sometimes it was a soft golden thrum that seemed to well up from the very core of the earth, imbuing the air with a warm, honeyed quality. During these periods, the deep velvety leaves of certain broad-leafed plants, whose undersides were dusted with a coppery shimmer, would release a comforting scent reminiscent of baked apples and warm spice, a fragrance that spoke of cozy hearths and gentle contentment. The very soil would feel warmer to the touch, radiating a nurturing energy that made one wish to simply lie down and be held by the kind earth. At other times, the light would shift to a cooler, more silvery pulse, a serene and almost ethereal radiance that bathed the vale in a light like that of a gentle, benevolent moon, though no moon ever graced the sky here. When this silver light prevailed, different plants would respond. The delicate bell-shaped blossoms that Elmsworth had pointed out would glow with an even softer amethyst hue, and their perfume would change, becoming cooler, cleaner, like the scent of fresh spring water flowing over smooth pebbles, carrying a hint of mint and damp earth. The air itself would feel lighter, crisper, inviting quiet contemplation. Elmsworth, a figure of serene constancy, would often be nearby, tending to the needs of the glowing plants with movements that were slow, deliberate, and filled with a quiet reverence. He rarely spoke, but his presence was a comforting anchor. Sometimes he would gently guide the traveler's attention with a subtle gesture of his hand, perhaps towards a patch of earth where the starlight from below was particularly bright. Kneeling close, the traveler might perceive tiny, seed-like crystals embedded in the loam, each no bigger than a pinhead, pulsing with a faint warm light and humming with a barely perceptible vibration. A thrum that resonated deep within the chest, not as a sound, but as a profound sense of inner peace. One afternoon, as a particularly soft golden light suffused the vale, Elmsworth led the traveler to a small, clear pool of water nestled amongst a cluster of broad, luminous lily pads. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the gentle glow from above and below like a dark, polished mirror. Elmsworth cupped his hands and drew up some water, offering it to the traveler. It was cool and tasted faintly sweet, with an undertone of minerals and something indefinably vital, like liquid starlight. As the traveler drank, a sensation of quiet refreshment spread through them, a gentle clarification of thought and a soothing of tired limbs. The surface of the pool, when touched, rippled with soft, concentric circles of light. The traveler began to feel an extraordinary connection to the very ground beneath their feet. It was no longer just earth, but a vast, slumbering entity, a gentle guardian cradling its hidden, nurturing stars. They would often sit for long stretches with their back against one of the whispering stones, feeling its steady warmth seep into their being, its inaudible hum a constant soothing lullaby. The stones seemed to draw out any lingering tendrils of old anxieties, much like blotting paper soaking up ink, leaving behind a feeling of spaciousness and calm. The scents of the vale were a constant, gentle delight. Beyond the primary fragrances of the golden light and silver light flora, there were myriad subtle undertones. The clean, slightly sharp scent of crushed fern fronds, the dry, papery aroma of certain seed pods as they ripened, the occasional drift of something that smelled like warm bread from an unseen, distant part of the vale. Each inhalation was an invitation to be more fully present, to appreciate the intricate, quiet symphony of aromas that composed the vale's unique perfume. The traveler found that their own thoughts, when they arose, were softer now, less insistent, often dissolving into simple appreciation for the beauty surrounding them. Sometimes, Elmsworth would share a piece of luminous fruit, plucked carefully from a low-hanging branch. These fruits glowed with a gentle inner light, their skins soft and yielding like perfectly ripe peaches. The taste was extraordinary, a blend of sweet earth, honeyed light, and a hint of wild berries, the texture melting on the tongue. Eating such a fruit felt less like sustenance and more like a communion with the gentle magic of the vale itself. In these simple, shared moments, a deep, unspoken understanding flowed between the traveler and their quiet host, a shared gratitude for the profound peace that permeated this hidden sanctuary. Chapter 4. The Stillness of Being. The restless currents of thought that had once defined so much of the traveler's inner landscape had, by now, almost entirely subsided. In their place, a profound, appreciative stillness had settled, as gentle and pervasive as the subterranean light itself. If thoughts arose, they were like soft clouds drifting across a peaceful sky, observed with gentle detachment and allowed to pass without leaving a trace. More often, the mind was simply quiet, allowing the senses to fully absorb the exquisite, simple beauty of the vale of rooted stars. The focus had shifted entirely from doing or becoming to simply being. There was an extraordinary joy to be found in the smallest of observations, a kind of innocent wonder that the traveler had perhaps not felt since earliest childhood, if ever. One morning, while sitting on a bed of silvery blue moss that felt as soft and springy as the finest wool, they watched a single, perfect drop of dew clinging to the tip of a glowing frond. As the pulsing light from the earth caught it, the dewdrop fractured the luminescence into a tiny, fleeting rainbow, a perfect miniature arch of soft, shimmering colors that existed for only a breath before the light shifted, and it was gone. The sight brought a gentle smile to the traveler's lips, a moment of pure, unbidden delight. The sounds of the vale, once perceived as a profound quiet, now revealed themselves as a delicate orchestra of gentle murmurs. There was the soft, almost melodic sigh of the air as it passed through the hollow stems of certain tall, slender grasses that grew near the clear pool. They swayed with an elegant, unhurried rhythm, their movement a visual echo of their soft sound. The traveler would sometimes sit near them for what felt like hours, listening to their gentle exhalations, feeling their own breath naturally deepen and slow in response, becoming as soft and regular as the sighing grasses. The textures of the vale were a constant source of quiet pleasure. The cool, impossibly smooth surface of the whispering stones, warmed by their inner thrum, the plush, yielding carpet of the various mosses underfoot, some feeling like velvet, others like dense, soft fur, the delicate, almost papery thinness of certain luminous petals, so fragile they seemed to tremble if one breathed too near. The traveler often walked barefoot now, the better to feel the subtle vibrations of the earth, the coolness of the dew-kissed loam, the surprising warmth of sun-dappled, or rather, star-dappled, patches of ground. Each sensation was a grounding anchor to the present moment. Elmsworth remained a figure of quiet companionship. Their interactions were sparse, yet deeply meaningful. One evening, as a particularly soft, silvery light filled the vale, they sat together by the clear pool, its surface like polished obsidian, reflecting the gentle glow of the overhanging lumen flora. Neither spoke. Elmsworth, after a time, reached into a soft pouch at his belt and drew out a small, intricately carved wooden flute. He put it to his lips, and a melody of such profound, gentle sweetness filled the air that it seemed to become part of the light, part of the quiet pulsing of the earth. It was a simple tune, with no complex flourishes, yet it spoke of ancient peace, of starlight sleeping in the deep, and of the quiet joy of being. The traveler listened, eyes closed, feeling the notes vibrate within their very soul. On another occasion, while observing the slow, majestic unfurling of a particularly large, creamy white bloom, whose heart glowed with a soft golden light, Elmsworth simply met Traveler's gaze and gave a slow, understanding nod, a shared acknowledgement of the quiet miracle before them. He then gently plucked a single, perfectly ripe, luminous berry from a nearby bush. It shone with a soft, peach-colored light, and offered it to the traveler. The berry burst upon the tongue with a flavor that was at once sweet and tangy, like sunshine and cool earth combined, its texture impossibly soft and melting. In these moments, words were entirely unnecessary. The shared experience of beauty and peace was a language understood by both. The very act of breathing had transformed. In the clean, sweet, gently vitalized air of the vale, each inhalation felt like drawing in not just oxygen, but the quiet light, the profound peace itself. Each exhalation was a letting go, a release of any lingering tension, any echo of past weariness. The traveler noticed, with a gentle sense of discovery, that the persistent ache that had once resided in their shoulders had vanished, that the slight furrow in their brow had smoothed away. The environment itself was a constant, gentle invitation to relax, to soften, to release into a state of effortless being. The warmth of the earth, the gentle hum of the stones, the soft caress of the air all conspired to cradle them in a profound and restorative calm. Chapter 5. A quiet radiance carried within. Time in the vale of rooted stars did not march with the measured tread of the outside world. It flowed like a gentle stream, meandering and unhurried, its passage marked only by the subtle shifts in the subterranean light and the slow unfurling of luminous petals. And so, it was with a sense of gentle surprise, rather than any abruptness, that the traveler began to feel a quiet readiness, a subtle stirring that suggested the moment for departure was softly approaching. There was no sadness in this nascent feeling, no regret, only a profound and resonant gratitude for the sanctuary found, for the deep, quiet healing that had taken place. The weariness that had clung to the traveler like a shroud upon their arrival had dissolved completely, as thoroughly and gently as mist in a soft morning light. In its place resided a calm so deep and intrinsic, it felt as if it had always been there, merely waiting to be rediscovered. It was a quiet radiance, an inner glow that mirrored the gentle light of the rooted stars themselves, a peaceful hum that resonated from the core of their being. The traveler felt not merely rested, but fundamentally restored, their spirits smoothed and soothed, their senses alive and receptive to the gentlest of beauties. Elmsworth, with his intuitive understanding that transcended words, seemed to perceive this subtle shift. One morning, as a particularly soft golden light bathed the vale, making the dewdrops on the glowing moss sparkle like scattered diamonds, he approached the traveler, who was sitting quietly by the clear pool, watching the light play on its still surface. In his outstretched hand, Elmsworth held a small, perfectly smooth river stone, gray-green and cool to the touch. Embedded in its center like a miniature galaxy was a single tiny speck of what looked like solidified starlight, which pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth and light. A small piece of the vale's quiet, Elmsworth murmured, his voice as soft as the rustling leaves. "To carry with you. Its light may dim in other places, but its warmth will remain, a reminder of the peace that is always within and all around if one knows how to listen." The traveler accepted the stone, its gentle weight a comfort in their palm, its faint thrum a familiar, soothing vibration. They looked at Elmsworth, their eyes conveying a gratitude too deep for easy words. Elmsworth simply smiled, a slow, kind smile that held all the peace of the vale itself. There were no grand farewells, no prolonged goodbyes. Such things would have felt out of place in this haven of quiet understanding. The travelers simply stood, the small star-speckled stone held gently in their hand, and inclined their head towards Elmsworth in a gesture of deep respect and thanks. Elmsworth returned the gesture, his gaze calm and reassuring. Then, as quietly as they had arrived, the traveler turned and began to walk towards the subtle parting in the ancient hedgerows that marked the threshold of the vale. As they stepped back through that almost invisible doorway, the ordinary world that greeted them seemed subtly, wonderfully changed. The air, though different, no longer felt tired and gray. It held a new clarity, a fresh potential. The sounds of the common world, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of ordinary leaves in an ordinary tree seemed softer, imbued with a gentle music the traveler had not perceived before. It was as if the profound sensory awakening experienced in the vale had attuned them to the hidden beauty present everywhere. The path ahead was still unknown, its destination undefined, but this no longer carried any weight of anxiety. The traveler moved with a new lightness, a quiet confidence that emanated from the deep well of peace they now carried within. The memory of the vale of rooted stars was not a wistful longing for a lost paradise, but a constant comforting presence, a soft inner landscape to which they could always return in thought. The gentle pulsing light, the sweet earthy fragrances, the profound healing, quiet, all these were now woven into the fabric of their being. The small stone in their pocket, with its tiny captive star, was a tangible reminder, its gentle warmth a quiet promise of the enduring radiance, found and carried forth